Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack and his mother lived in a small cottage. Poor but content. Their only valuable possession was their cow, Milky, who provided them with milk. One day, Milky could no longer produce enough milk. So Jack's mother sent him to sell her at the market. On the way, Jack met an old man who offered him a small bag of magic beans in exchange for the cow. The man promised the beans would change Jack's life. Jack hesitated but, with little to lose, agreed to the trade. When Jack returned home, his mother was furious. "Magic beans," she cried, tossing the beans out the window in anger. Jack felt guilty but couldn't shake the feeling that the beans were special. That night, as Jack went to bed, he had no idea that the magic of the beans would soon reveal itself in a way he could never imagine. The next morning, Jack's mother was still furious. She paced the floor, shaking her head. "I can't believe you traded our cow for a handful of beans. What were you thinking, Jack?" Jack stood in silence, feeling ashamed. He had hoped the beans might be special, but now he wasn't sure. His mother's angry words stung, and he wished he had sold Milky for money, just like she had asked. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jack said quietly. "I thought they might be magic. I didn't mean to make things worse." His mother shook her head and, with one final look of disappointment, went to work inside the cottage. Jack stood by the window, staring at the small, quiet garden outside. The beans lay there, forgotten and thrown into the earth, as if nothing had changed. Just as Jack was about to turn away, something strange happened. He looked back outside and gasped. A tiny shoot was poking up from the ground. Jack blinked, unsure if he was seeing things. The shoot was growing fast, and in just a few moments, it seemed to shoot up higher and higher into the sky, as if reaching for the clouds. Jack's heart raced. Could it be? Could the old man's magic beans really be magic? By morning, Jack stared in disbelief as the small shoot had grown into a massive beanstalk, reaching far into the sky and disappearing into the clouds. His mother rushed to the window, shocked.
"What is this, Jack?" she asked. "Wide-eyed."
"It's the magic beans, Mom. They really worked," Jack exclaimed, his excitement growing. Without wasting another moment, Jack grabbed the beanstalk and began climbing. His heart raced as he ascended higher, passing through the clouds. His mother called after him to be careful, but Jack was already too high to hear. The beanstalk seemed to stretch on forever, and Jack's curiosity pushed him higher, eager to see where it led. Jack climbed the beanstalk with all his might, his hands gripping the thick vines as his feet scrambled for footing. The higher he went, the colder and windier it became. The world below seemed farther and farther away, and Jack's heart raced with excitement. What awaited him at the top? He had no idea, but the thought of adventure kept him going. As he climbed, Jack tried not to think about how dangerous it could be. What if the beanstalk broke? What if he fell? But then he remembered how much they needed a change, how much his mother had hoped for a better life. This beanstalk might be the key to everything. After what seemed like hours, Jack finally reached the top. He pulled himself over the last few branches and found himself standing in a strange, misty land. Giant trees towered above him, and the ground was covered in soft, thick grass. In the distance, Jack saw a massive castle, its towers disappearing into the clouds. Jack took a deep breath. He had made it. Now, the real adventure was about to begin. He set off toward the castle, excitement and curiosity pushing him forward. As Jack walked toward the castle, the strange land around him grew even more mysterious. The trees were taller than any he had ever seen, their trunks thick and twisted. The grass beneath his feet was soft, but it stretched far and wide, making him feel small in this vast world. It was like stepping into another realm, far removed from the familiar village he had left behind. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He continued his journey, his eyes fixed on the towering castle in the distance. It looked ancient and grand, with high stone walls and large, arched windows. The closer he got, the more he could see the richness of the place: golden doors, shimmering jewels, and beautiful carvings on every wall. As Jack approached the entrance, he hesitated. The castle seemed abandoned, but something about it made him feel both excited and uneasy. Could the giant be inside? He didn't know what to expect, but he knew he had to be careful. He crept closer, taking slow, quiet steps. The giant's presence hung in the air, like a shadow, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Suddenly, he heard a loud, booming voice from inside the castle. It was the voice of someone, or something, immense. Jack froze. The giant was home. Jack pressed himself against the stone wall of the castle, his heart racing. From behind a large pillar, he peered inside through a crack in the door. The castle was grand but ominously silent. The floors were made of polished marble, and golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Everywhere Jack looked, he saw treasures, coins, jewels, and priceless artifacts. But one thing caught his attention more than anything else: a giant golden harp resting in the corner of the room. Before Jack could step inside, a loud rumble shook the ground. The doors creaked open, and Jack barely had time to hide behind a large curtain before the giant entered. He was enormous, at least 3 times the size of any man Jack had ever seen. His boots were like small houses, and his voice thundered through the air as he muttered to himself. "Fee-fi-fo-fum," the giant bellowed. "I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Jack's stomach dropped. The giant was terrifying, but Jack knew he couldn't turn back now. He had come this far, and the treasures of the castle were too great to ignore. As the giant stomped into another room, Jack quickly and quietly slipped inside the castle. He marveled at the piles of gold and jewels, but his eyes were drawn to the golden harp, its strings glowing with a soft, magical light. Jack knew he had to be careful. He had to make his way to the harp without waking the giant. But the temptation was too strong. He tiptoed closer, his hand trembling as he reached for the golden harp. The giant's loud snores echoed from the other room. Jack grabbed the harp and began to slowly back away. Suddenly, the strings of the harp began to play on their own, as if the harp had a life of its own. The melody filled the castle, sweet and haunting. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he realized that the harp could make sound on its own, magical sound. The giant's booming voice echoed from the other room again. And Jack knew he didn't have much time. He had to escape quickly. He turned to leave but was caught in a flash of motion. The giant was coming back. Jack froze as the giant's footsteps echoed through the castle. He quickly hid behind a tapestry, clutching the golden harp. The giant's voice boomed. "I smell something. Who's there?" Jack held his breath as the giant passed by, his massive form blocking the light. Jack waited until the giant was far enough away, then tried to sneak toward the door. But just as he reached it, the giant turned around. "Come out, little one. I know you're there," the giant thundered. Thinking quickly, Jack stepped forward, holding the harp. "I'm just a traveler," he said, trying to sound calm. "I meant no harm. I was admiring your beautiful castle." The giant leaned down, eyes narrowing. "Admiring? Huh? And my harp?" he asked. Jack nodded. "It's magical. I've heard the sweetest music from it." The giant studied him for a long moment, then surprisingly chuckled. "Very well, little one. I'll let you go this time. But don't try anything foolish again." Relieved, Jack quickly backed away toward the door. Just as he stepped out, the giant's voice rang out. "Remember, boy, if you return, I won't be so kind." Jack breathed a sigh of relief as he stepped outside the giant's castle. The golden harp was tucked safely under his arm, and he was eager to escape before the giant changed his mind. But as Jack made his way toward the beanstalk, something else caught his eye, another treasure, even more incredible than the harp. In a grand chamber off to the side of the castle, Jack noticed a large golden cage, and inside it, a beautiful golden goose. The goose was perched on a golden perch, its feathers shimmering in the soft light. Jack's heart raced. He had heard of such a creature, a goose that laid eggs of pure gold. The thought of taking the goose made Jack pause. He had already stolen the harp, and he wasn't sure if he should push his luck further. But the golden eggs were too tempting. If he could take the goose back with him, his mother and he would never want for anything again. Taking a deep breath, Jack crept into the room where the goose was kept. The giant's voice still echoed from the distant halls, but Jack was focused on the task at hand. Slowly, he approached the cage. The goose looked at him curiously but didn't make a sound. Jack carefully opened the cage door and, as quietly as possible, reached inside. Just as he was about to lift the golden goose, the creature flapped its wings, startling Jack. He froze. But the goose didn't cry out. Instead, it seemed content to let Jack gently scoop it into his arms. Jack's heart pounded as he stood there, holding the golden goose. He knew he had to act fast. The giant was bound to return at any moment. Without a second thought, Jack hurried toward the door. But just as he stepped out, a loud crash echoed from behind him. The giant was coming. Jack bolted, clutching the golden goose to his chest. The beanstalk was only a few steps away. But the ground shook with each step of the giant's heavy feet. Jack's breath quickened as he ran toward the beanstalk. The giant's angry shouts growing louder. "Stop! Thief! Get back here!" the giant bellowed. Jack's legs burned with exhaustion as he reached the base of the beanstalk. Without looking back, he began climbing. The golden goose clutched tightly in his arms. But the giant was close behind, his enormous hands grabbing for the beanstalk. With every step, the beanstalk trembled, and Jack's heart raced faster. He climbed higher and higher, knowing that the giant's pursuit was not far behind. Jack climbed the beanstalk as fast as he could, clutching the golden goose. Below, the giant's booming voice shouted, "Stop! Thief!" The beanstalk shook with each step the giant took, and Jack pushed himself harder, his arms and legs aching. The giant was gaining on him, and the beanstalk swayed dangerously. Jack didn't dare look down, his focus solely on reaching the top. The clouds loomed ahead, and with one last burst of energy, Jack pulled himself over the edge just as the giant's massive hand reached for him. Breathing heavily, Jack scrambled down the beanstalk. Not daring to look back, he ran straight to the cottage, the golden goose still in his arms. He slammed the door behind him, heart racing, and his mother stared in disbelief as he entered. "I made it, Mom," Jack said, smiling. "Our luck has changed forever." Jack's mother stared at the golden goose in awe. "This is amazing, Jack. But what about the giant?" Jack nodded, his heart still racing. "He'll come after us. But for now, we're safe. The goose will give us all we need." As Jack spoke, the goose laid a golden egg, gleaming in the light. But then, a loud crash came from outside. The beanstalk was shaking. The giant was climbing. "Quick, Mom! Lock the door!" Jack shouted. He grabbed the axe, ready to protect his mother. The giant appeared, shouting, "Give me back my treasures!" With a determined look, Jack swung the axe and chopped down the beanstalk. The giant screamed as it fell, and Jack heard nothing more from him. Jack and his mother, now safe and rich, lived happily ever after, their future secure with the golden eggs. With the beanstalk gone and the giant defeated, Jack and his mother finally felt at peace. The cottage, once small and humble, was now filled with the glimmer of golden eggs from the goose. Jack had brought home not only riches, but also the courage to face any challenge that came their way. Each day, the golden goose laid more golden eggs, and Jack and his mother no longer had to worry about food or money. They could finally live the life they had always dreamed of, comfortable and free from fear. But Jack didn't forget where he came from. He used his new wealth to help others in the village. He built a larger home for his mother, shared his good fortune with his neighbors, and became known as someone who helped those in need. As the years passed, Jack grew into a wise and generous man. He remembered his adventure up the beanstalk and the lessons he learned: courage, kindness, and the importance of doing what's right. And though he no longer had to worry about survival, Jack never took his good fortune for granted. Jack and his mother lived out their days happily, surrounded by the comforts of their new life. And the golden eggs continued to bring them joy for many years to come.